Hello and welcome. Thank you all for attending the second panel of the California Ocean Science Trust's 2026 Sea Change Scholars webinar series, Navigating Your Future, Careers at the Ocean and Coastal Science Policy Nexus. My name is Heidi Waite, and I am a science officer at OST, whose mission is to strengthen the connection between scientific research and sound ocean management. And part of meeting this mission includes making investments to support graduate education and ultimately California science capacity. This webinar series aims to give students a window into the real-world ocean and coast-related careers at the science policy interface in California. In addition to these panels, we have developed two companion journals for this webinar series to help you explore careers, reflect, and to learn how the science and research skills that you are currently developing could impact your journey. So one journal features guided personal career reflections, and the other offers post-panel questions. These are designed to help you consider your personal values and your strengths alongside the real-world insights shared by our guest speakers. And they can be found on our website, linked in the chat. Also on our website, you'll find recordings of our kickoff webinar, which was a 30-minute overview of California state entities at the Ocean Science Policy Nexus, as well as our first panel with staff from the California Coastal Commission. Moving forward, we're going to continue featuring staff to discuss their careers and their roles that they play at the state's science policy and management landscape. Today, we're really excited to have staff from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, or CDFW, whose mission is to manage California's diverse fish, wildlife, and plant resources and the habitats upon which they depend for their ecological value and for their use and enjoyment by the public. Our panelists today, as I mentioned, will provide some insight into their roles and their career paths and their journeys. We'll start with some introductions by the panelists, then we'll dig into questions, including those that we received via the registration process and those submitted today via the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom frame. So we invite you to submit your questions through there, and we'll pull on them throughout today's discussion. All right, okay, I think with that, I'm going to invite the panelists one at a time to turn on their camera and give a brief introduction. And I will start with Ian Kilmartin. Can you please join us and take a moment to introduce yourself, your name, pronouns, and current title? And we would also love if you could give us a quick high-level overview of the mission and the role of CDFW on the landscape.
Sure. Thanks, Heidi. Thanks, OST staff. Thanks, all of y'all, for your interest in the department. My name's Ian Kilmartin. I'm an environmental scientist in our Northern Marine Invert Management Program based here out of Santa Rosa. The department's a big agency with a big mission. Broadly, we're responsible for the conservation of all of the plants and animals in California and in our coastal ocean. And we do that in a few ways. Directly, most of us, all of us are in this little teeny part of it called the marine region, where we manage both recreational and commercial take of species, as well as nearshore habitat through marine protected areas. The rest of the department, all the land dwellers, they manage almost anything you come across. What's going to set us apart from other conservation organizations you might interact with is that we're regulatory, which means we make the rules, people have to follow them, and we also have a law enforcement arm with our wardens who have the same jurisdiction as the highway patrol. And I think, let me make sure, yeah, so coasts and oceans. I think what's interesting about the group of people we have today is we're all involved in management of commercial fisheries, which is a little bit different than folks you might have talked to before. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Great, thank you, Ian. Next up is Armin Barilotti. Thank you. Join us with your camera, and I welcome you to also do a similar quick introduction of your name, pronouns, and job title.
Hi, my name's Armin Barilotti, he, him. I'm an environmental scientist, and I'm part of the Southern California Fisheries Research and Management Project. Essentially, we manage all Southern California marine state managed fin fishes.
Great. Thank you. All right, up next is Lindsay Caldwell. Same intro.
Hi, nice to see you all, and thanks for having me. My name is Lindsay Caldwell. I'm a senior environmental scientist specialist, and I am part of the Whale Safe Fisheries project here at CDFW, also part of the invertebrate team. Yeah, so I'll leave it at that.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay. And finally, I'm happy to introduce Morgan Ivins Duran. If you would also like to give your quick update, introduction.
Yes. Hi, I'm Morgan Ivins Duran, she, her. I am a senior environmental scientist supervisor for CDFW's marine permitting project based in Monterey.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining us today and taking the time. We're very excited to have you and to hear about your experiences and your career journeys. Now that you've shared your job titles, I'm hoping we can dig into those a little bit deeper. So, would you each be willing to give us a little bit more on what your title actually means, what you do in your role, and the kinds of daily or regular tasks your role entails? So, a little mini overview of your position. I think we'll go in the same order. So, starting with Ian, and then I'll pass it off to Armand and Lindsay, and then Morgan.
Sure. So my official title's environmental scientist, which, if any of you are familiar with sort of the state employment schema, that's a very broad classification. I describe myself as a biologist or a fisheries manager generally. I get to do a lot of different and interesting things. This stretches from field research all the way up to writing regulations and appearing in front of the Fish and Game Commission. I work on recreational fisheries. This includes the unfortunately closed abalone clam. I do a lot of recreational clam management. And then on the commercial side, I've done a lot of shrimp and prawn fishery management, writing plans for that. And then sometimes I get to help out Lindsay with the whale safe fishery flights, which is a good time. I'll leave it there. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Armand, if you wouldn't mind doing the similar.
Sure, yeah. Just like Ian said, the environmental scientist label is pretty broad. I always kind of label myself as a fisheries biologist. But within my project, we have a lot of fish species that we work with, anywhere from a little blue-banded goby all the way up to a giant sea bass. But the fisheries in particular that we work with are uh, California halibut, white sea bass, the three basses, so that's kelp bass, barred sand bass, spotted bay bass, California sheephead, and then all the perches, all the croakers, and there's just a laundry list of species we are responsible for. So the kind of daily task is monitoring those landings of those species, reviewing research that other scientists have done, and then kind of sometimes taking that into policy of going towards regulation. So just like Ian, go in front of the commission for those. And then the part I find the most fun is we have a handful of field projects. So I lead a dive survey where we count fish, and then we have some other trawl surveys and things like that we do.
Very interesting. All right, Lindsay.
Hi there. So as I said, I'm part of the Whale Safe Fisheries project, which is kind of a unique part of management of our fixed gear fisheries at the department. So we touch on largely Dungeness crab, commercial and recreational, but we are working with a number of other small fisheries in the state to reduce marine life entanglements. So Morgan actually was part of this team when it first started. It's a bit of a new project since 2020. So my main task is to lead our working group. So it's a nice stakeholder group where we have lots of industry fishermen, we have nonprofits, and so we work together in a way to develop recommendations on how to reduce entanglement risk. So my day-to-day could be very different. We are interfacing with researchers, our other managers on the team to collect data on a very quick cycle. So in season, we're assessing risk, could be every 2 weeks. And that does include getting up in planes to do our own surveys, which Ian helped with and Morgan has lots of experience in. So that's really fun. Yeah, so I think I'll pause there, hand it off to Morgan.
Great. That's super fascinating. And Morgan, I would love for you to do your sort of mini overview, but then also if you wouldn't mind giving a little bit of an overview on what the environmental science series means at CDFW and if there what are the key differences among titles?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as a senior supervisor, my primary job is to oversee a team. So my particular team and the work that we do, the Marine Permitting Project falls within the Marine Region's Habitat Conservation Program, and we manage two different sets of permits, experimental fishing permits and the marine branch of our scientific collecting permit program. And what that looks like for the team is, we're interpreting regulations, we're writing permit conditions, we're tracking, reporting, we're monitoring compliance. And we're doing a lot of public facing work as well. People have questions. Do they need this permit? What kind of permit do they need? What are the rules? How much do they cost? And producing outreach materials for that work. So in terms of like day to day for what I am doing in terms of being a supervisor, there's like a whole administrative side of things, timesheets, schedules, time off requests, all that good stuff. There's a lot of workload and project management. And then there's a lot of like review of draft products. So like we're going to send this letter, we're going to write this set of permit conditions. We're replying to an email from a member of the public, taking a look at that before it goes out the door and providing direction on like how to address issues as they come up. There's also a lot of sort of coaching and mentoring and skill building for the team and sort of doing the big picture vision, sort of like setting, okay, what are those 6 months, 12 months, 2 year goals? Where are we trying to move and sort of guiding the work in that direction and staying on track. So yeah, if you're not familiar, state service can be a little opaque. We're going to touch on a few different pieces of that, I think, today. But to start with, yes, we have three different types of environmental scientists on this panel. And the environmental scientist series has four levels, actually, and I'll touch on the fourth one as well. So, environmental scientists, that's like the day-to-day work of the Marine region. They're reporting to a senior supervisor. They're often working really closely with other ES staff. They might act as a lead for scientific aid positions or fish and wildlife technician positions, but they aren't like formally supervising anyone. It's also what we call a deep class. So you can start as a range A, B, or C environmental scientist and then progress through that during your time at the department. A is the entry level, C is what we call the journey level. And that really just reflects the level of responsibility, how much independent work might be happening, and it is tied to salary. So, like, you're at that range C, you're making more money than someone at that range A. And with a master's degree, generally you're starting at either B or C if you're getting hired at the department. Senior specialists like Lindsay, that can vary quite a bit. It really depends on the role, but you might be doing like really independent work. You might be working really closely with a team with other environmental scientists or senior specialist staff. But really, the thing is, there is like you are a technical expert in like whatever the subject matter is that you are working on. Like you are the person at the department who knows about this particular piece. Um, and yeah, you're not formally supervising, but you are often acting as a lead, and you're generally reporting to an environmental program manager. Whereas a senior supervisor like me, like we are formally supervising direct reports, and also reporting to an environmental program manager, and less in the weeds on the subject matter, but like need to have a sufficient understanding of the subject matter so that you can provide that direction, you can provide that oversight to the work. And then the last level in the series, an environmental program manager, you're overseeing an entire program. So your direct reports are senior supervisors and senior specialists. You're reporting to the manager who oversees the entire marine region. So you're a little more removed from the day-to-day work, but you're doing that really big picture planning, big picture oversight, and you're providing input on stuff that affects the marine region as a whole. So, for example, our HabCon program that I'm in, we do scientific collecting permits, experimental fishing permits, manage the entire marine protected area network for the state of California. We do California Environmental Quality Act, California Endangered Species Act, and offshore wind. And so my boss oversees all of that work for the whole marine region. And in terms of just a general breakdown in marine, we have about 140 permanent positions. About 60 of those are environmental scientists, about 17 to 20 are senior specialists. Another 20 are senior supervisors, and then there are 6 environmental program managers. So that's kind of how the pie breaks down.
Amazing. That is the best concise summary of something like that I've heard. So I appreciate you breaking it down for us. Also helpful for myself to know. Great. Well, I'm thinking this next question also for all of you, just to get a sense of, since we have these different levels and potentially different backgrounds, I'm really curious to hear about how the path to your current role, what is the career journey so far of how you got there, and if there were any key experiences or jobs that led you to this position that were most pivotal that you'd like to highlight. So maybe I'll start with Ian again if you're all right with that.
Sure, definitely. So I'm originally an East Coaster from Philadelphia area. Grew up by the water, but started college as a chemistry major. Didn't like that very much, so I was like, oh, I'll do marine biology. So I have a bachelor's in marine biology from the College of Charleston in South Carolina. Then a bunch of, I'm sure everybody's familiar with this. You sort of bounce around doing different odd jobs. Eventually landed a master's position up at Humboldt State University, now Cal Poly Humboldt. So shout out if any of y'all are in the audience. And I worked on the baseline monitoring of fish in marine protected areas. If any of you are familiar with the California Collaborative Fisheries Research Program, we are sort of a precursor to that. So I was very, very fishy the whole time. Um, then a couple other things. I got the California Sea Grant Fellowship Program. I think there's at least one other of those in the group at San Francisco Estuary Partnership, which was managing wetland restoration and coming up with a big monitoring program. And then I was hired right out of there into my position at the department where I've been for the past 6 years. And I mean, it's hard to point to anything in particular. The Sea Grant program's awesome, particularly if you want to get into management and state work. But I think just following your interest. I worked construction for a number of years, and that's helped me get marine biology jobs because I can build things. So you never know, but Sea Grant's great.
Great. Yeah, definitely sounds like Sea Grant is a good uh way to get into state, but also just a lot of transferable skills from things you might not think are important, but can be very important. All right, Armand, you're next.
So a little different. I was born and raised in San Diego, by the beach. Both my parents marine biologists, so I kind of got the push in that direction just by the general lifestyle. But something I've always loved since I was little is fishing. Grew up, loved to go fishing. In high school, I worked as a deckhand and cook on a sport boat out of San Diego. I went to UC Santa Cruz for my undergraduate degree. From there, I helped organizations like Peace Go doing underwater surveys. Did an RAU to Antarctica, and then I graduated in 2008, right in the middle of the recession, so there was no jobs. I worked for an environmental consulting firm for a little bit, went back to the sport boat just to make some money. From there, I was able to move on to aquaculture of kelp in Santa Barbara. That was for a little bit. The funding ran out, did steelhead research for the Kachuma Dam. And then from there, I got a job working in Monterey, doing abalone aquaculture as well as marine collections for public aquariums and scientific institutions. Realized that jobs that I wanted, I needed to have a little bit higher degree of education. So I went to Cal State Long Beach in the Shark Lab to get my master's. From there, I worked for an environmental nonprofit doing habitat and abalone restoration off the Palos Verdes Peninsula. From there, I went to the department, and I've been with the Southern California Fisheries Research and Management Group for about 6 years. And just kind of echoing along with Ian, again, it's just every job you have has different aspects that really help you for the jobs that you get into. It's surprising how many little things, like actually I'm using this, like working on the fishing, but I'm using the knowledge of working with those fishermen to help create regulations or look at regulations in their perspective. So there's so many different things you can use that you didn't think would be relevant.
Right, which is a good practice potentially to sit down and reflect on your current position and the kinds of skills you're gaining out of it, and to be able to think about transferable skills as you go on to your next step.
Yeah.
Great. Lindsay.
I love this question because I always love hearing other panelists' responses because our paths are always so interesting. Marine scientists are most exciting, I think. So I'm also from Southern California. I grew up mostly near the beach. Always knew I wanted to do marine science. And so I went to school at UC San Diego and knew right away I wanted to go to Scripps at some point. I had a long journey to actually get there as a student, but I was able to volunteer in a lab, a coral reef ecology lab, and then from there was able to transfer that weirdly into a research position where I led a study on yellowfin tuna and bioaccumulation and toxins, which I did not have like a tox degree or anything, but I was as an ecologist, I was able to go collect the tuna from around the world, process samples, and then I worked with a number of different labs to collaborate on that study. So that was really interesting. And then for like 10 years, I was a coral reef ecologist. So I would spend lots and lots of time underwater, traveling around the world, surveying coral reefs, which was very, very fun, very tiring for towards the end. So traveled the world looking at lots of fish, doing fish counts and stuff like that. Um, I pivoted into I knew I wanted to be closer to home. And I really just had experience internationally, which is kind of weird. And so I got an opportunity to do my master's at Scripps. And so use that as an opportunity to kind of bridge between purely research into policy management. And so that's what I did my thesis on, was actually experimental fishing program at the federal level, and my thesis was one way to kind of explore early days in the California program. And so from there, graduated also during COVID from my master's, so things were tricky. So I was able to land a job at the Ocean Protection Council here in California, which is really eye-opening. And so a lot of my work and coursework during my master's directly contributed to me getting that position. And I did that for about 3 years, and I learned about the position I currently have. And so I've been with the department for about almost 3 years now, this July. So yeah, it's always a really windy road. I was a kayak guide for many, many years, all over the world too, and did childhood education in marine science, and you just never know what you're going to be using. So, and I think, as you heard, you just kind of get jobs sometimes. It's tough. It can be a really tough field, and I think where you live is going to be a big impediment sometimes. I was from San Diego. You got lots of schools coming out with marine scientists in San Diego. Sometimes jobs can be hard. So I think doing what you can when you can is okay. And as long as you can market those skills, you'll use them later. So I think that's kind of my biggest piece of information of how we get to where we are.
Yes, great advice. Thank you for that. All right, Morgan.
Yeah. Like everyone except for Ian, I grew up in California. I grew up in LA, and I did my undergraduate on the East Coast. I got my Bachelor's of Science in Marine Biology, and some of the coursework I did there and some of the fellowship programs I participated in as an undergrad were really my first exposure to the idea that there was like a science policy management nexus, and that like not all marine biology jobs are like playing in the ocean. There are lots of them that involve playing in the ocean. Some of them involve like sitting at a desk. And so from there, I did my master's at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, and that program I actually had funding from California Sea Grant to do that work. And I was evaluating conservation impacts of the Central Coast MPA network on the local recreational party boat fleet. And because I was getting funded by Sea Grant for that work, I got invited to participate in something called California Ocean Day, which is like an annual lobby event. And that was sort of my first direct exposure to like what advocacy looks like at the legislature to help drive policy change. And I was like, oh, this is cool. I did go through a period of fun employment after grad school. It was really stressful. But at the end of that, ended up getting a California Sea Grant State Fellowship at the Ocean Protection Council in Sacramento. So like Ian, I am a fellow, former fellow, and that really was a hugely impactful experience for me. I cannot say enough good things about that program. If you are a recently completed master's, PhD, or JD, it is an amazing way to get firsthand direct exposure to what it looks like to work in that science policy management space and to figure out if you like it before you go, before you commit to like a real sort of permanent job. You're directly working with state and federal agencies and you're seeing how you can apply your scientific training to that space. It's also really great networking, honestly. So, I have been now at the department for 10 years. I went straight from my fellowship into my first role. I had three ES positions before I got my current role about a year and a half ago. And I've worked on everything from groundfish to highly migratory species management. And then spent about 5.5 years in the team that Lindsay's currently on, working on marine life entanglement risk.
Amazing. Definitely also have a lot under your belt of experiences, so thank you for sharing all those. I had a question to ask about sort of making this transition from some of you all have some research backgrounds into more of a management context. So I wanted to ask what that transition was like to management and if there's any advice or skills you'd recommend in cultivating when you're looking to follow a similar career path in the state. So maybe I could pass this question to Armin first, and then uh, maybe Lindsay, and then we can see if anyone else has any thoughts too.
Sure. Transitioning from research to management. I guess for me, I'm still doing research, and that's the part that I love, and part of why I love this my current position is I get to do all of it, but a lot of it in terms of management is like we get to look at the species and the information gaps that are missing. And if there's something critical that other scientists aren't doing, we get to go, hey, we need this data. Hopefully we can write a grant or we have enough internal funding. We can just go do it. And that informs the information for our species. We're currently looking at barred sand bass, running a stock assessment, and there's some information that we need. We need to do ages of the fish that are out there that the sport fishing fleet is currently catching. Well, last summer we just went out there, collected the fish that we need, and we're aging them currently, and so going to go directly into the stock assessment for the management of this species. So that's something I just like the you can just go do it, and it really helps that species you're looking at.
Go for it, Lindsay, if you want to
Okay,
follow
a
that
second.
question.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't do research in this role as much really as we provide data to support researchers or we'll work very closely with them. Yeah, but like I said, I really felt like I needed a bridge. I had spent 10 years in research and not a lot of applied management, but I knew that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to have hands-on connection with the people and the resource. So I knew I needed to get that experience. And since I was able to secure a master's, I got some funding to do a master's. I chose a thesis that allowed me to get that experience. So that was one way I really spent time. I felt like my coursework at Scripps, they had some really focused policy management classes, which I found super interesting. And I made connections just with professors, and they were really dynamic courses. So you're able to network through that program as well. And then I didn't go directly to management. I went to policy, which was very interesting. I found like it was a huge learning experience, and it was also very pivotal to me getting into the management position I have now. So it was another stepping stone. So I think however you go about getting it, you can have internships, fellowships. For me, I was able to do it through employment, which was great, but I don't necessarily think that's the most common route. And I was definitely going to try and do the um, fellowship route, the Sea Grant fellowship, but just didn't work for me. But yeah, I think just getting the experience in some way and be able to speak about it clearly and effectively when you go to interviews, then people can understand how you've taken that information and can use it in that position.
Great. And on that note, we've had a couple questions actually come through around the application process and how to stand out. So I'm wondering if we can maybe shift briefly and jump down to that a little bit. So we've had some questions around advice on applying for environmental science positions and how do you actually apply for those. So if Morgan, if you wouldn't mind giving us a brief overview of that process, and then we can jump into some of these questions coming through the Q&A.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, yes, getting hired at the state is confusing if you don't have someone explain it to you. I had someone explain it to me 10 years ago, and so I am happy to share that knowledge back out. So, all jobs at the state fall into what we call a classification that's designated by CalHR. So all the people on here, environmental scientist, senior specialist, senior environmental scientist, supervisor, those are all classifications. ES classification is a great place to start if you're interested in the kind of work that we have all described doing, but there are coastal program analyst positions that get hired a lot at the California Coastal Commission. There are research data specialist positions. So like sort of depending on the type of work you want to do, figuring out sort of what classifications are out there is the first step. And then you need to get on what we call an eligibility list. So there's a website, it's Cal Careers. I think that link's going to come in the chat. The first step is to search for the exam for the classification that you want to be able to apply for jobs in. What the exam looks like differs based on the classification, but the ES series is essentially a really convoluted and painful resume builder experience. I'm sorry, space it out. Have a beverage. It's a process. The Coastal Program Analyst exam, when I took it 10 and a half years ago, was an in-person exam in front of a three-judge panel about the Coastal Act, but it is now a lot like the ES exam. So they're all a little different, but you take that exam and you hit submit if it's online, and then you get a score, and you either passed or you didn't pass. There's like a minimum threshold. As you're taking that exam, I definitely recommend prepping your answers in a separate file and saving that file, and then working through the exam, pasting your answers in there. Especially if you might need to retake that exam later, whether it's because you didn't pass it the first time or you're generally only on that list for a year. And then if you haven't gotten a job in that classification, you have to take the exam again to be eligible to apply for more things. So if you don't want to have to reinvent the wheel every time, prep those answers in advance. And if you don't pass it the first time, there's generally a waiting period before you can take it again. So it's always best to get on that eligibility list before you want to start applying for jobs, because once you start applying for jobs, those jobs are generally posted for 2 weeks. So it gets posted, you find it, you want to apply for it. If you're not already on the eligibility list, that's a really not fun experience for you, because in addition to taking the exam, you're also prepping all of the documents that are required to apply. So there's a standard state application form that every single position for the entire state of California has. But you're often also going to be putting together a resume. You're going to be preparing a statement of qualifications. You might be putting together a cover letter. And then, that you apply, the period closes. There's an initial screening by HR, and then only the things that pass that initial screening get passed to the hiring manager. That's generally going to be the supervisor for that position. So there's like the piece that's HR, and then there's the piece that's in the program. And then every interview sort of hiring process looks a little differently, but there'll be at least one interview, might be in person, might not. Maybe there'll be like a supplemental exercise that you do on your own time, either before or after the interview. And the other thing I will say, two more things I'll say. It can be a really slow process. Like there's a lot of things where you have to go check with HR, and then you wait to hear back from HR, and that might be a day and it might be 6 weeks, and like the hiring manager has no control over how fast HR gets back to them. So just be prepared for it to be an extended process. And the other thing to know is that for state hiring for permanent positions, like before that position is even advertised, the hiring supervisor has developed like merit-based screening criteria, like that they have to submit to HR. So read the job posting closely, figure out what they're looking for, and like make sure your application materials like address that. And also follow the directions. There are a lot of otherwise qualified people who get screened out before their application even makes it to the hiring manager because they didn't follow the directions in the job posting. So it's a close reading exercise. Take your time with it.
Amazing. That's a great overview and great advice. Which I guess one quick follow-up that we had a question through the chat. Is there a do you know in state organizations if there's a preference for getting a master's, if you're getting a master's from a program from California, or are folks considered from other states with masters too?
I can't speak for like every person who hires in the state of California, but what I will say for what I've observed from my time in the Marine region is like it doesn't really matter, but that depending on the work you're doing, it can be helpful to have some experience in the marine environment in California. It's not a requirement, but just because of the type of work we do, if you have only ever worked, in environments on the East Coast and you have like never seen the Pacific Ocean before, that might not be as competitive as someone who's like done field work or had a job working in the marine environment just because it's helpful to like understand like the context of our work, but like where exactly your degree is from doesn't matter. And like one of my direct reports like had never been to California before we hired him, so like it's definitely possible, but it certainly helps to have had some experience in the marine space in California.
Right. No, that makes sense. So I might open up to the rest of the panel briefly since you've been chatting for a while, but do any of you have just general advice for applying to those positions? And if there's any, are there things, especially in supervisor role where you're Morgan, you might be hiring folks, are there ways to stand out? Yeah, maybe I haven't heard from Ian in a while. Do you mind taking a stab at that? Not to put you on the spot.
Sure, sure. Yeah, Morgan said, I'm going to underline, read the job description. You have no idea how much sweat and blood goes into getting those things through HR. And so they mean something. So read it, tailor your application to that. Um, the rest of it was like how to stand out. I mean, it's a competitive field, and I've reviewed some done some hiring for techs and sides and stuff like that, and I feel like the people that stand out, you gotta get your resume and all that follow directions, right? That's the baseline. The people that stand out have the experience and they really articulate why they want that job and how their experience qualifies them, either in a cover letter or a statement of qualifications. Have somebody read it. Get your stuff, edited by somebody is a good writer. Just like that helps so much. I'm a grammar nerd, so if somebody's writing is uh really, really nice, that goes a long way with me. But of course, there's other things.
Yeah, getting the second set of eyes, outside perspective is always helpful, I think. Sometimes you're so deep in your own writing, you can't get that wider view. Any of the other panelists want to comment or give any advice on the application process or standing out?
I think I can jump in a little bit. I helped at the Ocean Protection Council with hiring too, and I think you could pretty much easily separate people that really tried, and you could tell that they changed their CV or resume to reflect the needs of the job, and ones that didn't. And then of the ones that did, I think if you're worried about maybe getting the showcasing your experience, like then submit a cover letter. I think people have lots of strong feelings about them one way or another, and I think for a lot, Morgan, correct me if I'm wrong, they're usually not required for department positions, but I think they can't hurt if you feel like you want to express experience in a different way that's not captured. Um, yeah, but I think really, as Ian just said, like articulating if you get to the interview level, your passion, and really, really pinpointing those like action terms that are in the job description and make sure you can address those really specifically is helpful.
Also great advice. Thank you.
Yeah, I think everything that Ian and Lindsay said, and to add to that, um, it's really obvious when someone is interested in like that position as opposed to like a position, right? And almost basically all the work we do in the marine region, like there's a web page somewhere, wildlife.ca.gov, like, and there's a web page for the work that we all do. And reading the job posting closely, reading the duty statement that's posted that describes the details of that position, and then showing that you like actually cared enough to like spend some time like online, like trying to learn things, really shows that like you want that job. And that's, also comes through really strongly in materials. It comes through really strongly if you're selected for an interview. We these days are commonly getting 50 to 100 applications that pass HR screening. Like the hiring supervisor is reading materials for like 50 to 100 applicants, right? And you're like winnowing through and you're making your short list. And so anything you can do to like really show like you have are like technically competent, right? You have the basic science skills. You have those soft skills, project management, time management, working with stakeholders, contentious issues, follow through on things, and that you like really care about that job. It's a lot of work to hire at the state. And it's a lot of work to onboard people, and like you want to show that you're going to be like a good value to that group and that person who's hiring and is going to be spending a lot of their time helping get you up to speed, so that you can contribute to their team.
Right.
One last thing, real quick. One thing it's also don't be nervous or scared if you only have your master's. I think all four of us just have our master's, and the department hires master's students, PhD students. It it's more of the experience that you have within how you present yourself there. So don't be discouraged if like, oh, I'm going up against a bunch of PhDs. If you only have your master's, it doesn't hurt you that you only have that.
That's a great point. Definitely, master's is a lot of experience, a lot of work. So definitely don't be discouraged. Which, on that note, a brief question we got through the chat about someone with a PhD. Do you know kind of the journey level or classification that they should be aiming for, or is that a little bit fluid too?
I would say with a PhD, ES or senior specialist, or senior supervisor, there are there are folks with PhDs who started at each of those levels of the department. So it kind of just depends on the particular position and sort of like what skills you're bringing to that.
Great. No, that's helpful to know though.
I might add something real quick because I think that's exactly right. And Morgan, correct me if I'm wrong. I was in a unique position where I got hired or was about to be hired, and I was like a month out from finishing my master's. So we're playing the game of did it make sense to wait to hire me till I was officially done or not? And it's not whether or not necessarily you have the degree because it's looked at is experience. So because I came with the degree and like 10 years of experience in the field already. I was more experienced than someone who went straight from undergrad to a PhD and had no work experience. So I think about it that way as well.
Yeah, so the you can read, and I can find the link and put it in the chat so it can get shared out. But you can read sort of like how like range A, B, C for ES works, and then like what more you need to qualify as a senior specialist and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it is years of experience, and there's an educational substitution. So it's like there's a minimum number of years of experience, and then if you have a master's, it's worth X years of experience. If you have a PhD, it's worth X years of experience. So there's like some math, very easy math there, but it is that combination for sure.
Got it. No, that's helpful. All right. I'm wondering if we could kind of zoom back out again on each of your positions and maybe talk about some of the favorite things you've gotten to do for your work and what aspects of the job maybe you find more challenging or least less glamorous. And if you also have any comments on whether the job is as you expected or not, would love to hear those thoughts. And since maybe I'll start with you again, Ian, if you don't mind.
Sure. So what I like, what I don't like, and there was one other thing you asked.
Yes, I don't know if there's anything unexpected from the position from when
Oh,
you first
cool.
came in. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Um, I'm a gearhead. I love being in the field. So I have a couple little boats I get to take care of and drive around out on the ocean. I kind of like logistics and stuff too, so I coordinate our North Coast dive surveys. And I myself, after some outside training and stuff, am going to become a department diver this year. So I'm very stoked to get paid to do some scuba diving. Um, I like being in the field. I actually surprisingly like the rulemaking and regulatory process. I think a lot of people that are just on the scientific or academic side of things, you do some work, you publish it, and it kind of goes out into the ether. As Armand was describing, we see this hole or this question that needs to be answered. We can go answer that to the best of our ability. And if that says, hey, we need to decrease take of this species or whatever it is, make some gear modifications. We can write those regulations and justify them and uh, bring it before the Fish and Game Commission. And you've changed the world, hopefully for the better, and not just making our regulations more complicated. Um, yeah, the least glamorous part is just there's a lot of paper pushing working for the state, purchasing stuff is a nightmare. That's it's my least favorite. The stuff that's actually my job is very cool and I love it all.
Great. So yeah, sometimes you have to sacrifice some of those less glamour parts for doing the fun bits you do love, whichever job has. So it's good to balance. I'm thinking maybe Lindsay, do you have any thoughts on what parts of the job you really like and find challenging and or unexpected bits of your job as well?
Yeah. In preparing for this, I was like, oh man, this part of my job I love and is also very hard. So it's a lot of the things are the most difficult. So one of my main duties is to facilitate our working group, which is super interesting. The way we manage the Dungeness crab fishery is extremely dynamic. It's like the only case of this in the state. And so every 2 weeks, we're thinking, are we keeping our fleet fishing? Are we reducing the number of pots or limiting how deep they go? Or, what tools are we using on our management box? And we're doing that kind of in step with our stakeholders. So it's super interesting, and you build these relationships with lots of different folks in the state. Also very difficult. Here it's a lot of politics. So that's been like a new part of the job. I knew what I was getting into when I got hired for this job, but it's super hard. Balancing an environmental NGO's initiatives with industry. So that's just a classic example. Is already heard we do field work for this position. It's all aerial surveys, so I'm not under the water anymore. I'm only above it. It's super cool when it works. So I coordinate all of our aerial surveys. And it is also one of the most difficult parts of my job these days. You're trying to coordinate where staff are and where our airplanes are and the pilots and the weather. And it's like a puzzle. So I'm already sorry, Ian, for the difficulties that we have with this. But yeah, those are just some of the couple things that I both love and have a difficult time with. Lots of material development because like we're in this dynamic 2 week cycle. And so every time we announce something new with the fishery, there's a slew of paperwork that has to be done just per all of our regulations.
Right. Great. So definitely some pros and cons there, but I love to hear that you're very excited about this work, which maybe Armin and Morgan, welcome to answer that question as well. But I'm also curious about what you find most motivating about your work or about the mission of the organization as a whole. So maybe I can start with Armand, and then we can pass it over to Morgan.
I mean, I think it's just getting back to that. It's like with the position I'm in, and it sounds like a lot of others, it's we get to look to see what's the missing information for our species and get to fulfill that. I really find that I just really enjoy that we get to have that hands-on approach with our fisheries, and then yeah. I also really enjoy getting to reach out to like talking to the fishermen and all the other constituents that are out there and getting a chance to meet with them. Like right after this, I'm running to a sport fishing show to head up a part of the Fish and Wildlife booth there just to talk to fishermen, talk to them about our fisheries. That part's rather enjoying just getting that face to face with them. All right,
Yes, I
Morgan, you
definitely
go.
love that. That sounds like a great part of your work as well. All right, Morgan.
Yeah. I think before I answer that, I'll I'll piggyback on the prior question just a little bit, which is that definitely one of the things that I did not know I would enjoy so much about my work at the department, and one of my favorite things to do is really crafting and interpreting like statutes and regulations and permit conditions and like figuring out how to write something in a way that's clear and enforceable and like to like put all the different pieces together and see what they mean and figure out if maybe we need to change what they say so they actually say what we meant. I've got a family full of lawyers. I did not want to go to law school. I wanted to be a marine biologist. But like the regulations and permit condition space is as close as I'm ever going to get to being a lawyer. And like the first time a set of regs that I wrote ended up in Westlaw and I got to like send the link out to the family chat was like incredibly satisfying. So, but yeah, I mean, the department, the Marine region, we manage public trust resources on behalf of the people of the state of California, and we provide access to those resources while also protecting the marine environment. So we are not a pure conservation preservation space. It is not like no touch, leave it alone. But it's also not like have fun, go take whatever you want out of the ocean, right? We're trying to strike this balance of competing interests and competing visions about like what the marine environment in California should look like. And like specifically for my team, it's like we issue permits that let certain people do special things for research and innovation purposes, but we're also trying to identify appropriate constraints to put on that research and innovation. And so figuring out how to accomplish both of those objectives is a really delicate balancing act, and it's a really interesting intellectual problem, and it has a real impact on, the long-term sustainability of the marine environment here. So,
No, appreciate that. Thank you for that reflection on your jobs, everyone. Moving quickly to some skills, because I'm hearing some skills through both talking about what your favorite parts are and some of the challenges, some of those skills that you're developing in your position now, but also potentially some from grad school. I wanted to ask if there were any important skills in grad school that are transferable that you are using your job now, and if there's anything unexpected that's come up in skills that you currently use for your position. Maybe we can have one or two panelists answer that given the time. I think we had listed Armin having some thoughts on this, so maybe you could kick us off and then we can open it to see if anyone else has any
Sure,
thoughts.
I am, since we're limited on time, probably like the thing that I use most or I improve most in grad school and that we all use most is writing. I was not the best writer when I started grad school. Not to say I'm the best now, but it's something that you do every day and you have to constantly work at. And it's so important for what we do. It's just being a clear communicative writer. So that is one thing also, if you're getting in for the research aspect, is being able to rip through data quickly. And I don't know, we have like a fun R working group within, or maybe not a working group, but our group within the department where we go through and look at scripts and things like that. And so that part's something that we went through grad school that I knew I'd use, but it's also fun that we have this fun little group together.
Yeah, the group definitely probably makes coding more fun. It's always good to have some friends to do it with. Anyone else want to answer that question? I have a follow-up as well on something specific.
Yeah, I just want to add, it's sort of also on this communication thing is public speaking, because as Armin said, you're getting out to your stakeholders, whomever they are. And depending on what you're doing, they might not be that happy with you. Um, that happens, and that can be challenging. But I got to work with CPFE captains in grad school, so had some real world experience with fishermen that now I'm out there talking with commercial fishermen and sport folks all the time. And then taking your writing and expressing that to people, it's very important to have. And again, it's not a natural skill. Some people seem like they have it, but they also work hard, and anybody can do it if you uh, work at it. So
The more you do
there.
it, the better you get at it, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. And the different contexts, different audiences, always good to
Mhm.
practice those. So finding opportunities to be able to try to speak or write to different folks is a good idea.
Mhm.
Amazing. And one specific follow-up on that, we've had a question in the chat about more maybe technical skills in terms of, for example, a GIS course? Is that, and the question was more surrounding the application process of, is that education or training? Because there's those two categories. So if anybody has an answer to that, would love to hear it, but also just curious about generally the kinds of skills, maybe technical skills that you all find useful. And I bet it varies a bit by your subject area and the kind of work you're doing. I don't know if anyone wants to start that one.
Yeah, I can start off with the first piece of that maybe, and then I'll let the rest of the panel chime in as well. But yeah, I would say if you took a specific class on it, then I would probably call it education. If it's more like you like learned on the job, then maybe that's training. Do your best. That's always the advice with those exams. But yeah, I mean, it's really going to depend on the specific job, right? There's whatever, 140, different positions in marine region, and they all require sort of like different, technical skills. But I would say safe bets are like field work is always great. We do have a very active dive program in the marine region. So, if you have underwater skills, even if they aren't specifically related to like what you're doing in that position, like it's always nice to have more divers in the department. If you have coding skills, if you have experience doing stock assessment modeling or statistics, like those kind of quantitative skills, data analysis, large data crunching, like, whatever coding languages you know how to do and whatever kinds of data you know how to manipulate. GIS is definitely something we do. So, it really depends on the specific job. But those are all probably safe bets in terms of sort of like hard skills, I would say.
Amazing. Thank you. I don't know if Armand or Lindsay, you have anything to follow up on that, but it sounds like these are some of the big ones.
Yeah, and it's just good to have those skills. You bring more to the table when you're applying for a job. They go, oh, you can do like this job may be specific for these things, but then like, oh, we could also use this. And so it's good to be well-rounded in the skills that you have. But there's nothing I would say particular that you need to do. It's like Morgan said, specific to the jobs that you're applying to.
All right. Well, I know we're getting close to time, so maybe just briefly a quick fire. I know I didn't prep you for this, but a quick fire end of panel question for you all. Just last one sentence, last minute advice for folks that are looking to or looking towards a state kind of position or something like the positions you all hold. Maybe I'll start with Ian because you're on my left on my screen. I'm sorry.
Okay. Specifically looking for the state, don't get discouraged. It can take a while to get in. And there's a lot of people who get their foot in the door in some other position or some other agency and eventually make their way over to something that's more in the realm of what they want to be doing. So don't count any job out. There's probably going to be interesting things to do.
Great. Lindsay, I saw you come off mute first.
Oh, yeah. No, what Ian just said. And I think once you get your foot in the door, it's easier because you understand kind of the whole landscape of CDFW. So, yeah,
Awesome.
be open.
Armand?
Sure. Maybe just make sure you have a good network of people that you're talking with and maintaining. There's so many times that people talk about people, you just don't even know them. So it's good to have a good network of people behind you too.
Awesome. And Morgan, round us off, and then I'll do some wrap-up remarks.
Yeah, I think take that exam early. Don't wait until you find the perfect job. Be prepared to apply for the perfect job when it comes up. And be open, and like Ian was saying, be open to something that doesn't seem like it might be the perfect job because you never know what you're going to learn from that role and what it might lead you to in the future.
Amazing. Well, a huge thank you to our panelists for taking the time to chat with us. And thank you to all those who tuned in or who sent in questions. We really appreciate your attendance and engagement. Though not all panelists are good, our panels are going to be recorded, this one will be available for reference on our website on the 2026 Sea Change Scholars webinar series page that we shared at the beginning of the call. And just to note, and mention at the beginning of the session, but we have a lot of resources on our website. including our recent recorded webinars and our first webinar, which was that kickoff 30 minutes quick overview of the California ocean policy landscape. Our next panel next month on April 2nd, 12 to 1, we will have staff from the California State Lands Commission joining us to share their insights. So definitely join and sign up if you haven't already through the QR code on the screen right now or through our website. But with that, see you next time. Thank you so much for your time. Bye.